Good afternoon. You're listening to Fresh Start Today. I'm your host, Jermaine Reed, and you're listening to WNOV 860, The Voice. We are excited today because we have a very special guest in the studio with us from the Wisconsin Department of Children and Families, the Secretary of the Department, Miss Eloise Anderson. Good afternoon, Miss Anderson.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. You know, before we get going, I just want to say I just came back from a hip-hop Generation Youth Summit with the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And I was so excited to be here with the secretary that I just said, I can't stay at my own place with the minister. But it was a really great audience to see so many people, diverse population of youth, young people, gangs, opposing gangs, or so we say, sitting in the same room together, talking about social justice, talking about love and respect for mankind. And so we're definitely honored over Fresh Start to have with us today the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. So if you decide that you would like to participate in this conversation today, we're going to be talking about the importance of engaging fathers in child welfare services. The importance of engaging fathers in child welfare services. Please don't hesitate to pick up the phone and call 414-444-5250, 414-444-5250. Please make your comments brief, be respectful, and we look forward to you joining this conversation. Again, good afternoon and welcome, Secretary. Well, there's a lot of data, international and national, that report fathers engaged in children's lives in a healthy, responsible way has a profound effect on their lives, mentally, educationally, socially, medically, etc. Fathers add value to their children's lives. Unfortunately, there are not a lot of publications or studies that identify non-custodial fathers being extensively involved in child welfare case planning and service delivery. Anecdotal evidence will suggest that traditionally biological fathers have been overlooked in case planning and service delivery. A number of studies have examined some of the reasons why birth fathers or non-resident fathers have not been more involved in that process. Literature will suggest that barriers like caseworker and systemic bias, casework overload, judicial prejudice, primary caretaker preference, mothers gatekeeping, fatherless men, and the other characteristics of non-custodial fathers. So while we touch on some of these barriers, we will also look at promising practices that Wisconsin Department of Children and Families is currently implementing to identify, locate, and involve non-custodial fathers in child welfare cases on the front and the back end. So this should be a very exciting, informative conversation. And so I'm going to ask you a couple questions, Secretary Anderson, and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here today. Can you explain to us what is the role of the Department of Children and Families in designing and implementing child welfare programs in Wisconsin?
Well, we have two roles.
Okay.
One is that we are responsible for the federal child welfare services money, which comes in two forms to us. One, to take kids out of home, and we call that 4E money.
Okay.
And the other one is to provide I call it aftercare services. It'd be independent living and things like that, and training and development money. That's one role that we have. The other role we have is that we are a county-run system. Okay. And so we supervise the counties in providing child welfare services. So we develop the policies and the procedures and establish the practices that the counties do. And our third one is we actually run the Milwaukee Child Welfare Program, which is, I like to say, we're a county-run system except for Milwaukee County.
Okay. And so how long have you all been running the Milwaukee County child welfare system? It seemed like around 99, 2000, somewhere, the turn of the century.
Yeah, yes, that's pretty close, turn of the century.
So it's fairly new, about 15 years.
Yeah, it is. I think it's time to start thinking about sending it back to the counties.
You want to send it back?
Well,
you know what?
Yeah, because In all the other counties, the counties run it.
Okay.
In all the other counties, it has a close relationship to juveniles.
Okay.
It has a close relationship to county mental health. It has a close relationship to all the other services that go on in the county. It is a part of the county. In Milwaukee, it sits outside of that, and I think those other agencies are important in terms of organizational relationships. So I think it needs to go back, and I think in maybe 10 years it'll be ready to go back. I think the county will be ready for it to come back.
You know, a couple years ago, maybe, I don't know, I'm guessing 6-7 years ago, DCF was formerly DSH. I can't remember.
No, I think what happened.
HFS.
Yeah, well, we were actually in two different departments.
Okay.
See, right now we have W2,
Okay.
which people know as Wisconsin Works. We have child care, so we oversee child care.
Okay.
And we have child welfare. So child care was in TANF, we're in DWD.
Okay.
And child welfare was in health and family services.
Okay.
So they took those two out of the two departments and created this new department called Department of Children and Families.
Okay, that's great. Now, you know, with every administration, I can remember the former secretary, of the Department of Children and Families, Reggie Bika. He had some priorities. Every secretary, I think, has some administrative priorities that they focus on at the beginning of their term. Can you talk about what some of your administration's priorities were, and then how did you identify what you thought we should focus on as from the state perspective?
In the child welfare
Yes,
side
for
of the
child
house?
welfare, yes.
Fathers. I wanted to bring fathers in. I wanted our tendency in child welfare, this is nationwide, is that when a family has a problem, usually the family is a single mom, has a problem in terms of child protection and the safety issues, and we're getting ready to remove the child from the mother hopefully temporarily. We don't tend to look for the father. We tend to look for a stranger. Or we may even look for her relatives, but we don't look for his relatives.
Paternal side, right.
So it's always on the maternal side of the house. So one of the things that I think, and which I brought to me in my thinking, is that the kid has two parents. So we need to look at the other side here. We ought to give the father a chance. And I think it's because child welfare and AFDC, Aid for Family Dependent Children, have been historically so close. And when we look at Aid for Family Dependent Children, there were no fathers involved. In fact, it was very difficult for you to even be on that program if you had a man in the house or if the father was involved. So we have this built-in bias to there's no father there, there's no man there. And so trying to break that bias has been one of my focuses.
Okay. Are there any other initiatives flagship programs or initiatives that you're working on? Because I know we're going to talk about fathers today, but anything else in a show?
My number one priority across all our programs is fathers.
Oh, wow. I love that. I love that. Where have you been all this time?
It's fathers. So and every one of my programs is fathers.
Right. Because historically, as you indicated, there has been somewhat of a systemic bias or discrimination toward fathers, excluding them from the case planning and the case of a service delivery process. Has it been easy to really kind of make that cultural shift, to get everybody kind of father focused or dual parent focused?
I think some people are ready for it.
Okay.
And some people are resistant. Because remember, every person in your organization brings their own experience to the organization. True. So we're a very female-dominated organization.
No.
Very female-dominated organization. And so each of us have our own experiences with men, or our fathers, right, or our brothers, or husbands or ex-husbands. So those experiences color how we see things. Some of us, like me, have really great relationships with my dad.
Okay.
I had really great relations, even though we didn't stay together, with my children's father. So I'm not negative to men. I have a son. I can't be negative to men. So I have two grandsons. Can't be negative to men. So I come with a bias towards fathers.
Okay.
Some people come with that's not where they are. So inside of an organization, you have all these kind of views.
Right.
So some will come with you easy because they understand it. Some are resistant because they think men. No. So they take more time to get, but there's always going to be more people with you than against you, and pretty soon everybody comes along.
And how do you measure whether or not, because the Department of Children and Families work with a number of organizations who serve children and families, even on the child welfare side. So it's one thing from the state standpoint to implement this position or this agenda, but how do you suppose bringing others to that place, because it's in the best interest of children that fathers are at the table and that we're supporting fathers equally,
Well, there's a lot of entities I have to deal with. One is the courts.
Okay.
So I can get the department on board, but if the court's not there, I'm swimming uphill.
Gotcha.
So one of the first things I start to have was conversations with the chief judge in the juvenile side. At the time was Judge Murray.
Okay.
About fathers and our view about fathers. And one of the things that was clear to me, not necessarily from him, but the judge is thinking, well, if he doesn't have a job, he shouldn't have the kid. And I would say, wait a minute, the mom doesn't have a job.
Right.
So how can you make this distinction between she's unemployed, but she's okay, he's unemployed, but he's not okay? And then to say, you know what, if he is the caretaker, he's eligible for W-2. And then try to get W-2 so it's more non-custodial friendly, which we've been trying to do in terms of our Transform Milwaukee Jobs and our Transitional Jobs program. But everything has to be father friendly. You just can't have one piece. Everything has to be father friendly.
Everything.
And a lot of our subcontractors, this is new for them, thinking about, we got to think about fathers.
Right.
Yeah.
We have to think about fathers. Because all the research shows that fathers who are engaged and involved in their children's lives in a healthy way, that it affects them pro-socially. It affects their mental health. It affects their academic performance. So it just seemed to me, and even teen pregnancy, those type of things, high school graduation rates are higher when we have fathers engaged in a healthy way. So child welfare that is intended or supposed to work in the best interest of the children. Family courts should be working in the best interest of children.
But they're asking now, have you found a dad?
Well, having found a dad, which was different, let's say 10 years ago. I think I've been doing this, I've been on this journey now almost 15 years. And I can say that I can see a shift, in, a cultural shift where people are asking, still a ways to go, but it's great to know that somebody is really pushing that movement and saying that fathers are important. Because I think there's a lot of fathers that I run into who will say that, they're intimidated by working with child welfare. They just prefer not to because they feel like they're going to be judged, or because it's a pro-mom type of environment. So I would like to applaud you and your administration for really focusing on supporting fathers.
I think the other place that child welfare is not alone.
Okay.
I think the other place in which we're trying to make a difference is in child support.
Yes.
Because a lot of these fathers have been in the child support system. So we know who they are, we know where they are, but child support has had this enforcement, this kind of a police orientation. So one of the things we've tried to do with child support is make it more service to non-custodial parents who are mostly fathers. So in many cases, if the custodial parent falls apart, we know how to get to him because he's right there in our child support side. So those two working together makes it easier to get to dads. And the fatherhood programs get dads involved earlier. And one of the things that we do notice is that when dads pay child support, the mom's opening up for him to be more involved with the kid happens.
Now, I'm going to say, why is that? Because I think that's also a financial is a marker. The financial status of a male or a man is the marker by a lot of folk, mothers and some folk who work in child welfare, as to whether or not this man should have the right to be involved in a child's life.
I think that comes. That may be historical.
That may be historical?
Well, yeah,
but
because
educate me.
Well, because I think men have always been seen as the one who go out and shoot the animal, bring it home.
Okay,
There's the meat.
Okay.
Then we got
Not eat. Yeah.
Right. The women go out and get the berries and the greens, and the guys go with the guns out into the forest. Okay. So men have always been seen in just about every society as the one who brings in the bacon.
Right.
Okay, that hasn't changed. And I know we like to think we've changed and that we're more sophisticated than we were 2,000 years ago. But I think women by and large, still look at men in the same way they've always looked at them. Is if you don't have a job, why are you talking to me?
Right. So how does living in a community where there's unemployment rate of 50% plus for African American men, African American fathers, how does that impact child welfare and, you know, the involvement of that child in that father's involvement in that child's life? Because for some of us, it's not that we don't want to pay child support, it's that we don't have the ability to pay child support.
I think it's two things.
Okay.
Is that having men who live in a community where they're highly employed comes out of the fact they've been in families where they didn't have role models of what men did.
Okay.
So it's sort of like this circular thing. So I'm a boy who grows up and I never see a man work.
Modeling,
I don't think that I'm supposed to.
Okay.
And there's supposed to be somebody taking care of me. I have never seen a man fix a house. I've never seen fix the light switch, do gardening, any of the things that men do, I've never seen done.
Okay.
So I'm modeling this ever since I'm a little kid all the way up. So when I get to be in high school or into adulthood, I don't have any skills. So it comes out of the single parent family. This comes out of.
Okay.
The other one is that moms are really not good at raising sons.
Right.
Because we don't know anything.
I
We don't
agree.
know anything about men.
Yeah.
We think we do.
Right.
But men are different. It takes a man to raise a man.
It does. It does.
And so one of the things that we have to do, and one of the things I keep working on in the community, is to making sure that there are resources. You don't need a lot, that are there focused on men.
Okay. Okay.
We've
What are
spent
some of those
50 years
resources?
focusing.
Yeah.
Well, we have our. It's really a father-focused program. Is our Transform Milwaukee program.
Okay.
It's really father-focused. And why is it father-focused? Because so many of our fathers don't have jobs. And the reason why they don't have jobs is because they don't have skills.
Okay.
And it's not the hard skills that they don't have. It's the soft skills.
Yeah.
So our intent for this program is to get men in a position where they can be the father, where they can go and have their kids stay with them. So you can have joint custody.
Okay.
Joint custody is, if you're not going to be together, joint custody is together. When fathers are involved, the kids don't wind up in the child welfare system. And I don't think people understand this.
That's important.
If I can get dads involved, my caseload in the child welfare system is going to diminish.
So we need fathers to be involved,
Right.
and we need mothers to work with fathers
Right.
in supporting that relationship between
Right.
that father and child. That's
Right.
critically important because, you know, I think that child welfare often gets a bad rap that the system is just coming out to take our kids. They want our kids. They're robbing us. They want our kids. But a lot of this can be avoided, kids coming to the system, if we can really have a partnership, you know, what you call shared parenting,
Right.
you know, and respecting one another, you know, because even if we're not going to be together, if we can just have some mutual respect
Right.
and understand what our mutual interest is, which is our children, then that will, like you said, reduce you all's caseload
Right.
significantly. Well, we're going to take a break. You're listening to Fresh Start Today. Our guest today is Secretary Eloise Anderson from the Wisconsin Department of Children and Families. If you would like to join this conversation around the importance of engaging men and fathers in child welfare services, please call 414-444-5250.
Do you know what Nelson Mandela, Andrew Jackson, Malcolm X, and Steve Jobs have in common? Each of these individuals were world leaders who were once in foster care. We often hear about the road from foster care to prison, but did you know there's another road from foster care to a world stage? Fresh Start Family Services is looking for adults to become licensed foster parents. Every child needs a caring adult in their lives. Wouldn't it be great if you could foster or adopt the next world leader? For more information on how you can become licensed with Fresh Start, please call 414-351-1100. That is 351-1100.
Good afternoon. You're listening to Fresh Start Today on WNOV 860 AM. This is Jermaine Reed, your host, and we have a very special guest in the studio, Secretary Eloise Anderson from the Department of Children and Families, and we're engaged in a very powerful conversation around the importance of engaging fathers in child welfare services. And it's just really great to know that Secretary Anderson has taken the helm on really trying to change the culture of child welfare to be more inclusive of fathers. And so I'm very, very excited about that. Being a father and being a male working in child welfare, just to know that fathers, we do have somebody in our corner that's really setting the pace for us. Secretary Anderson, question for you. When workers are attempting to engage African-American fathers in child welfare services, is it important for workers to acknowledge or address unchallenged stereotypes about African-American fathers?
I don't think it's just African-American fathers. I think it's fathers, period.
Okay.
And low-income fathers in particular.
Okay.
So if you come from low-wage worker, unskilled, don't have a high school education, there's a certain mindset about who you are.
Okay.
So I think color clouds some of it.
Okay.
But it's the male.
Okay. It's the male.
It's the male. And getting people to just have a different opinion about males.
Yes.
And how males present themselves when they're under stress.
That's important.
Because when men come in under stress, they behave very differently than women come in. And then depending on what they're confronting, they may be more assertive than the woman who's sitting on the other end, who's usually the social worker, is used to.
So assertive is not necessarily aggressive, though, and folk can misinterpret assertiveness for aggression.
Right.
Okay.
And by and large, men are bigger than women. Mm-hmm. So if I'm being an assertive man and I got a little woman in front of me, she's dealing with the power issue in front of her. She's not dealing with him.
Right.
So that's the issue of gender that we have to get across, of dealing with men. It would be helpful to have more men in this field.
Right.
It's so dominated by women and women's thinking that we've got a lot of training to do with women to get them to understand what happens when a man walks in the door and he's under stress.
Because, I'm so glad you brought that point up, because Secretary Anderson, you mentioned earlier that you had a healthy relationship with your father, with your brothers, with your uncles. You saw what a real man is, and you had a healthy relationship. And so for workers and mothers who were not blessed or privileged to have that same experience with you, they bring this into their work sometimes.
Right.
They bring all of themselves through the door. And so what can be done? I mean, I know you talk about training, and what does that training kind of look like? What are some of the overarching, some of the, focus points in that type of training that women need to know about men's communication style, about our thought process, or what's covered there?
Well, our workers go through an academy.
Okay.
This is Milwaukee.
Milwaukee,
this is not the rest of the state.
Okay.
Every county does it differently, but ours go through an academy, and at the academy we talk about families and how males present themselves in families.
Okay.
We are probably going to have to expand that to how do males present themselves when they're not in families, because that is different.
Okay.
One of the things that they're supposed to learn getting their social work degrees are all these issues.
Okay.
But when I look at the curriculum for the social work programs, I don't see these things being taught.
Okay.
But if I also look at who's in the social work professors, they're mostly women.
Okay.
So we have a whole system of women who we don't think. We have women's studies. We don't have men's studies.
Wow.
So this is all subtle stuff, but these are all the things that as you're trying to put a program together to change the culture of child welfare, to change the culture of work programs towards fathers or non-custodial fathers, these are all things you have to look at to make sure that everything is being covered.
Okay.
Poor fathers, low-income fathers are looked at very differently than middle-class fathers. And if you are a blue-collar worker father, you're looked at very differently than a father who has an attaché case and a tie.
Okay.
So we have all these ways that we see men that are not valid. And so to get all that non-valid stuff out of our system so we can get to look at you is difficult. I will probably be in my grave when all this gets turned around.
Wow.
But my job is to try to push us towards it.
Because you talked about, and I'm glad you brought in that piece about you pushing us toward that goal. As it relates to fathers and their children, you really kind of spearhead, or at least dropped the idea, planted the seed about a reading program between incarcerated fathers and their children. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I went to corrections, this is a couple of years back, and said, I've got kids who need to have a connection with their fathers. They're in prison, and what we know is that if dad is talking about reading, the kid will read. And one of the ways that can happen is if dad reads a book, send it and put it on a CD, let the kid hear it, give the book to the kid, and the kid reads the book back to the dad. I'm trying to establish a relationship with the dad and this child, but I'm also trying to get both of them interested in reading.
Wow. Because that's key. Because we do know that children who are proficient readers typically perform better academically, and as a result have better life outcomes and are less likely to be involved in the criminal justice system. So literacy and reading is foundational.
We also know that men who read coming out of prison don't go back.
Wow.
Because one of the things they bring out with them is their inability to read. So because they can get jobs, they can get skills. I mean, it's kind of tied to that.
Yeah.
So if I can get them to do a book with their kid, they're more interested in taking classes while they're in prison because they know they're not reading as well, and they want to perform for their kid.
Right.
So I want the performance for my kid, but I want the kid to perform for dad.
Wow.
So I'm trying
That's genius. That's just genius.
No, this is just
but it is because
it's everyday stuff.
See, listen to the genius. So everyday stuff, But that's beautiful, and for folk who have sons or men or fathers who are incarcerated at Racine Correctional Institution, it's my understanding that program is being done in that particular facility. And so reach out to your sons, your daughters, and your nephews, and if it's children that's listening, reach out to your dad and tell them, read a book and send it to me. Right. And so again, thank you, Secretary Anderson, for planting that seed, and that corrections is running with it. Now, we understand that 2.5, what some folk don't understand is that there are more black fathers who live with their children than who don't live with their children. And based on some 2011 data, 2.5 million black fathers live with their children versus 1.7 million who reside out of the home. And incarceration is one of the primary reasons why young black men are missing from our large community, that's missing from our children's lives. So again, I think that program right there really is a great bridge and connection to keep fathers connected to their children, even if they're incarcerated. So let's talk about, is it easier for administrators and practitioners to engage with one population of fathers versus the other? And what I mean by that is based on race or ethnicity, socioeconomic or marital status. And if so, why do you think that it's easier for some fathers being more involved, or what might lend to some fathers being more involved in child welfare services? I know you mentioned about socioeconomic status at low-income fathers and not having a job or low education, that those things can be barriers, definitely barriers. But how is it just easier that if a person is middle class? Because I don't know of any rich kids in foster care. I don't know of any rich fathers whose kids, I just don't know. I've never seen it out of 15 years, and not to say there aren't any, but typically
that may change.
Oh, really?
Well, heroin may change everything for us.
That's the truth.
Heroin doesn't have a class issue with it.
Okay.
It's one of the few drugs that I've seen in my lifetime that's not class oriented.
Wow.
Cocaine is class oriented, crack is class oriented, meth is class oriented. Heroin is not. So It's coming across all the classes. Okay. So we used to see low-income families go into child welfare system. I think we're going to see a lot more middle-class families come into the child welfare system.
Wow. Okay. So let's talk about some basic cultural considerations that workers and foster parents should take when engaging either Native American fathers, Hispanic, Latino fathers, African American fathers, Caucasian fathers. Is there anything that comes to mind that you can think of?
Well, people talk to me about culture. I think every family comes with their own.
Okay.
I mean, and I think where we miss people is that if I see a brown-skinned person coming in, I go, well, I know what that culture is. No, you don't.
Mm-hmm.
If I see a white person come in the door, well, I know what that culture is. No, you don't. If I see an Indian coming in, well, they're all the same. No, they're not. So I think we have to get out of this notion that people have one set culture.
Okay.
And try to let the family unfold their own personal culture, because they're different. Because inside of let's look at a black family. Inside of a black family, you might have someone who comes from Mississippi.
Okay.
And on one side of the family, and somebody who comes from Florida on the other side of the family. Those cultures aren't the same. So
Okay.
if I grew up in Florida, I got a whole set of influences on me that are really different than if I grew up in Mississippi.
Okay.
So I can't say the black culture, because there's two different cultures coming at me.
Wow.
If I'm white coming in the door, I can't say you're white. Where's white culture?
Okay.
Because your heritage might be Italian,
German, yeah.
and you got one half of your family, and the other half of your family might be Russian.
Okay. Okay.
So which half are you bringing in the front door? So this cultural notion, I just think we need to put that down.
Okay.
And then we just let the family unfold for us so we can see who they are.
Okay.
And everybody presents differently.
And so then the family becomes the teacher and we're the student.
Yes.
In essence.
Yes.
And that's important.
And we let the culture of the family come together,
Yeah.
which is one of the reasons why families don't do so well together. It's like we marry each
blend-
other,
Right,
and we
right.
think we're the same.
Right.
And then we have Christmas.
And then Christmas. I like it.
So, it's like,
Right, then culture shows. Yes.
yeah,
yes, yes.
our own personal
Heritage, yes.
culture
Yes, yes.
shows.
Well, you know what? For social workers and child welfare administrators, that has to be a lot. To really learn people, if we're going to value people for who they are and where they come from, that's a lot of educating that needs to be done.
Well, that's, fathers come to us in all different sizes, shapes, and thinking.
Right.
And if we get out of the notion that this father's like that father, and just, James is James.
Right.
James is not Joe.
Right.
And we learn who James is and not be afraid of James, then we'll be better.
Gotcha.
And we let the families present themselves. And I think by doing that, we'll have a lot more families that we can save.
Okay.
We have a program that we work with a lot, which is called My Father's House.
Okay.
Which does which does a lot of father finding for us. And one of the things that I see in their program is that they don't have set notions about what fathers are like.
Okay.
They let the man present himself. And I think they have a lot to teach a lot of our programs about, we can't make prejudgments about what people are.
Right. That's important. And I think that's Al Holmes over at My Father's House. So
right.
Great to hear that they are engaged in partnership. What are some other partnerships that the Beer Milwaukee Child Welfare have with community organizations that's really focusing on this father-friendly or fatherhood initiative? I know you talk about the courts.
Right. And we have relationships with the neighborhood centers.
Okay.
The neighborhood centers are real important because kids live in neighborhoods.
Right.
And the Boys and Girls Club, we have relationships with them. So we try to have relationships wherever we can. We have trying to get parents jobs because a lot of the parents really need work. So we have relationships with the Y and America Works and those programs as well.
Okay. That's great. We're going to take a break. And after this break, we will ask the secretary a few more questions and just glean from some of her wisdom and learn about the great work that she is doing as she's heading over at the Department of Children and Families. You're listening to Fresh Start Today. I'm your host, Jermaine Reed.
Hey, this is Jermaine from Fresh Start Family Services. Did you know the absence of a loving, nurturing father can wreck the lives of children? Unfortunately, millions of children and youth grow up without a healthy connection to their fathers for a number of reasons: abandonment, unemployment, incarceration, death, etc. When compared to other children, foster children are at greater risk of not being fathered. Fresh Start Family Services is looking for a few honorable single or married men to become licensed as foster parents. Research supports that children and youth in our community need one caring, supportive adult in their lives to take them from being at risk to at promise. Men, our future is in our hands. We can make a difference in the lives of young boys today. To learn more about how you can become licensed as a foster parent with Fresh Start Family Services, please call 414-351-1100.
Good afternoon, this is Jermaine on Fresh Start. Today, we are talking about a very important subject involving the importance of engaging fathers in child welfare services. And our special guest today is Secretary Eloise Anderson from the Department of Children and Families. And we've just been talking about a lot on air as well as off air, and we are really enjoying this conversation, this dialogue. If you would like to join it, please pick up the phone and call 414-444-5250, 414-444-5250. Secretary Anderson, when a child comes into care, immediately they're detained. At some point after detainment, let me put it that way, a service plan has to be created. Can you talk about what is a service plan, who are the players that are typically involved, and what type of outreach is done to try to make sure those players are at the table?
Usually there's a worker assigned to, in our case, it could be either St. Aid worker, who's our ongoing case manager, or a children's hospital, our ongoing case manager. So a worker is assigned to the children and the family, and they try to assess what's going on, what's the issues that is causing us to have to bring the kid out of the home. Usually, and I'm not going to say this is always, but usually it's neglect. In most cases. Sometimes it's abuse. But the neglect issue is pretty harsh. I mean, that's the harder one to come at, because you got to figure out what is going on in this neglect cases. Often, and I'm going to say often rather than usual, is substance abuse. Sits at the top. Now, what we know about substance abuse is once we deal with the substance abuse issue, is usually a mental health issue. Not mental illness, but a mental health issue.
Explain that to me.
Mental illness means I have some kind of brain issue, like I'm a schizophrenic or something like that. That's mental illness. Mental health would be I'm depressed. I've got a trauma that's gone on in my life that I'm still reacting to. So that's a difference. And I think when we try to look at these, the question is, how do we provide service? What we've done in the child welfare system, this is across the country, is we've gone to a case management system. Case management comes out of medical services. Long ago, when I was a young worker, and at Northcott Neighborhood House, the county didn't do case management. They actually did service provision, which meant your worker was more engaged with you than I'm going to send you or refer you over here, I'm going to refer you over there, and I'm going to refer you over there. Many of the people that we deal with need assistance in getting to the service. They need assistance in staying in the service. Some of them can do it by themselves. Most of them can't. So one of the reasons why it falls apart is because they haven't figured out how to carry out the plan. It takes a lot to carry out a service plan on your own. So you need a lot of help to do that. Sometimes you need help just getting there. And then the trust relationships, because in a service plan, you got to establish the trust relationships. And those trust relationships inside the services are sometimes hard to establish, because many times the parent feels that the person who's providing the service doesn't look like me, so therefore what they know about me.
Or they don't have kids.
Or they don't have your kids, or they don't have any of my issues. So getting to that, establishing that relationship so we can work on the issues is a really tough piece. If
you had to give advice or one or two things that you think that workers, ongoing case managers or care coordinators, whomever might be listening to this program today, if you had one or two tips that you can give them around engaging fathers and families in the service plan, especially when you don't look like them, you might be of different gender or, a different racial background. what would those 2 tips be? What's important?
Well, most of our workers are young.
Young, okay.
Okay. So I think walking into a family and knowing that you don't know.
Okay.
Because when you know you don't know, you don't make a lot of assumptions. You just let people experience you,
Okay.
and you experience them.
Okay.
The other thing that I think is probably really tough for workers is that we don't want you to get close, but you have to.
Wow.
You know, the system.
That's got to be tricky.
Well, the system says we don't want you to really get too close to these families.
Right.
But you can't get the relationship unless you do.
Right.
So the other one is how to go
Balance
down
it.
that fine line of establishing a relationship where people trust you and not getting so close that you personally get hurt.
Wow.
So those are the things that I worry about with our workers. And then for fathers, I think we just need more men. We need more men in the system to be able to have a relationship with the fathers, because these fathers have a lot of trauma.
So is there any partnerships with the education community, with the college community, universities, to really try to target getting more men involved in child welfare? Whether it's here or nationally?
Yeah, well, we've gone to the schools other than UW.
Okay.
We've gone to the other independent schools, because the independent schools have a great outreach.
Right.
And so we've talked to them about trying to figure out how to get more men in these programs. We've also opened up our hiring process, so it's not just social workers.
Okay.
So you can have a criminal justice background. That's where the guys are.
Right.
And so bringing them into the system. But when you bring a criminal justice person into the system with a bunch of social workers, they kind of look at each other and say, well, who are you and who are you?
Right.
So bringing that in. But that has brought more men into our system, and it takes adjustment.
Because I think, the boys who are in the system also need to be able to have contact with men who are working in the system.
That's true.
Just like if they're in the education community, they need to see male teachers in certain capacities. I can appreciate that, that you all are doing that. I recall reading a case a couple months back, maybe 2 months back. Because when we start talking about engaging fathers and the paternal side of family, changing the culture and focusing on the other half of that child's life, which is the paternal side, I can recall reading a referral once, and I literally counted each contact that was made. There was 40 different individuals who were connected to this particular child's life were contacted about whether or not they can take placement. Mm-hmm. And out of 40 people, there was no one that was either qualified or agreed to take this child. How important is it for families, if dad is unavailable, if he's incarcerated and mom can't take the kids, but for families to step up to the plate and say, we want our nephew, we want our niece? How important is that?
It is really important, but we got a lot of families that can't do it.
They can't do it?
They can't do it because they've got children.
Right.
They're working 2 jobs. They don't have the financial ability to bring this child into the home. They don't have the space. That's one issue. They're not connected to this child in any way, so they don't see how that's going to work and how that's going to upset their own family, which is why it's so important to go to the father's side.
Okay.
Because those are areas in which we haven't tested. Yeah, so when we tap into that, you often find the grandmother on the father's side will say, well, yeah, you didn't tell me.
Right.
But in a lot of cases, the mother is so disconnected from the father that those relationships never developed. So you're in the process of also developing relationships. You also have this thing where even on the maternal side, you have people don't want to get involved because they don't want to
be in the middle of that.
They want to be in the middle of that.
Right.
So what's it going to look like if I take this child and my sister and we're not going to have
a
relationship. So if you bring a kin in, you got to work with the kin to deal with the family issues that taking that child bring.
If there is a person that's listening this afternoon, Secretary Anderson, to this program, and let's just say their loved one, their family member was removed on yesterday or a week from now, what are some of the supportive services that kinship relatives can receive if they take that child into their home?
I think they can get help with those family relationships. They can get also foster care payments, so they can have some of the financial pieces dealt with. But they got to ask. We don't know what you want if you don't ask. You can't assume we know.
And sometimes we don't know.
Well, but then, but if you say, well, I'd like to take the child, but I'm not sure how that's going to work with my family, we ought to be able to hear that to say, we need to give you some family help with that.
Right.
So that might be family counseling to help you with that.
And and I remember a case that I just had not too long ago where a child was actually removed from my home. He transitioned from my home into a relative's home, but the relative had to get a larger place or whatever. And she received a lot of support from the system to really make that happen, because it's really important for children when it's appropriate to be placed with biological family, whether it's on the maternal side or the paternal side. So yeah, I was just kind of wondering about that particular case, because I saw actually counted 40 different people, and I'm just thinking maybe if one of them knew that, I can get some support, I can get some help, so maybe not today, but I can work on this, and the system has those.
And they got to be able to, you got to ask.
You have to ask.
You start with no, because you haven't asked. So the only thing you can get is no, and you've already got no, so it's not going to hurt you to ask. I tell people all the time, you never know what you'll get if you just ask for it. I
got 1 minute left of this program. We're so grateful to have Secretary Anderson with us today, and this has been a very engaging conversation. But if there's a young father that's listening to this program today, or a young teen foster father that's listening to this program today, and maybe he didn't have a role model, he didn't have a father, what advice would you give to him? What would you say to that young person today?
Go find someone who's a male, who you admire, and ask him to be your mentor.
Well, there you have it. That's the Secretary of the Department of Children and Families, Eloise Anderson. Thank you for stopping by and talking about this very important topic, and we look forward to having you come back in the future if your time permits. Again, you all be blessed, and I'll talk to you next week.